and welcome to today, Tuesday, 26th of April, meeting of the Audit Committee. Firstly, note to members that when they speak to themselves for the web streaming purpose, there is an opportunity to zoom in on attendees in terms of the camera, so those following will need to have to bear with the picture you have of us all sitting in this lovely room in the Institute here. So item number one, notice of recording and webcast. So I'm to advise this meeting will be webcast for live or subsequent broadcast by the Council's meeting YouTube site. And then apologies, item number two. Apologies have been received from Councillors Jenkins. Hendry, have we? Yeah, no further apologies. No further apologies. Item three then, declarations of interest. Members are reminded that they must declare all relevant pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests arising from any business to be discussed at this meeting. If a disclosable pecuniary interest is declared, a member must not speak or take that agenda item. Any declarations will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. Any declarations to be raised? Held on the 15th of February 2022, and the minutes of the meeting held on 29th of March 2022 for colleagues to consider and agree. Are there any issues with regard to those minutes? In which case,
I think John Roberts is indicating, Chair.
John.
Hello, Chair, and hello, everyone. It's not a point about accuracy of the minutes, but there was a bit of sort of email correspondence about our auditor's annual report that's referred to really in progress. So I wondered for the committee whether it was now or whether you wanted to bring me in later in the meeting in order to give my just position on the on where we're at with the auditor's annual report on value for money.
Thank you, John. I think I'd be happy to take that now as an item, so please continue.
Okay, and it's only a very brief update really, but to explain to the committee why it's not on today's papers. So we'd agreed the final version of the document as it stands at the 24th of March with officers, and then from that position the report is available for the council to consider. It's not due. It is only due three months after we've signed the accounts off. Now, we haven't signed those accounts off, so it's not yet due. But the fact that it's not due doesn't mean to say that it shouldn't be considered by the council. In fact, the National Audit Office does make the point that as soon as value for money audit findings are available, they should be shared. So, which is what we've done. And within that report, there is one page which refers to the accounts being still work in progress. Now, when we ultimately complete the document, we will change that page. We'll update it to say that the audit of the accounts has completed. But for all other intents and purposes, the value for money audit report will be unchanged. So the document that we have shared with the council is a I would describe it as a final interim document. Really, it is subject to one minor updating, but the points on value for money won't change. It's not, and I can confirm, it's not caught by the pre-election period, and it's not impacted by the fact that the accounts are not signed in the basis of the value for money findings. The reason that we then talked to officers about sharing it with the audit committee at this meeting was officers drew our attention to the council's internal procedures, which required the document to be shared by the chief officer, team, and by informal cabinet, I believe, prior to it going to the audit committee, and it is for that reason that we haven't brought it to this meeting. I do believe then, once you've completed your internal consultations, that it should be shared with the members of the audit committee. And I would also suggest that we don't wait for the subsequent meeting, that it can be circulated to members of the audit committee in line with the National Audit Office's desire that these reports are produced in a timely way.
Thank you, John. Becky.
Just by way of an update, so the report went to corporate leadership team yesterday, and it's due to go to EMT, informal cabinet, on the 10th of May. So it'll be well in time for the May audit committee.
Thank you. Councillor Morrell.
Isn't cabinet today?
But informal cabinet, it's not. It would never go to formal cabinet. It's not part of cabinet's remit.
Right.
The audit committee's remit.
Okay. Because when you mentioned cabinet, I was like, would that happen today? So
Yeah. No,
you could have done it yesterday, then cabinet, and then audit afterwards. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morrell. Any other comments? Okay.
Well, yeah, just to say, obviously, we're disappointed that we're not seeing it, but you already know that.
Councillor Morrell.
But it's out of our hands.
So we will look forward to seeing that report as soon as it's available.
So May
By the May.
agenda, I'd suggest.
Thank you, colleagues. Okay, in which case, thank you, John, for your update.
Thank you, Chair. I've just one other point is to introduce Nicola Coombe to you. Nicola is on the call. She's Laurelyn's replacement as the senior manager on the audit. Just wanted her to make contact with the committee. Laurelyn's also here. She's been promoted within Grant Thornton, but will still remain connected with the audit, so we don't lose her knowledge and experience.
Thank you, John, and welcome, Nicola, to working with the Birmingham City Council Audit Committee. We're a fun bunch and have lots of interesting discussions and value your input. And also my congratulations to Laurelyn for her promotion within the organisation. Councillor Bridle.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to clarify, going back to the value for money thing. So does that mean then that it can be shared with us as audit committee members before the council AGM, which I think is the 24th of May?
Yeah.
Which is when all the new committees are formed. So it will come round to us immediately after that EMT.
It should come round with the normal audit committee agenda. What date's the next audit committee meeting?
Well, that won't be until June.
Oh, is it June?
Because there'll be a new audit
Audit
committee.
committee.
But let me take that away, because I would hope that it could be.
So
So
it could be circulated before.
yeah, but
the audit committee.
I've just the process.
Didn't check the dates.
Yeah,
There's no reason why
Yeah.
we should leave that.
Yeah,
leave that with us and we'll come back to you, because
otherwise it would have to wait
Well,
until
in
the
the interim.
June audit committee.
I didn't realise there
Which
wasn't
I
one in
think
May.
would be out
Yeah,
of order.
yeah.
I think it should come round.
Let's,
It'll be towards the end of June, and we've got it here on the
Yes,
agenda.
it will.
that,
Yeah.
I think that in
So it needs
my
to
opinion, that
come
would be too late.
Before the council AGM.
Colleagues. Colleagues, John, you want
Sorry,
to come in?
yes, I was going to say, in my opinion, June would be too late for
Yeah.
that purpose, and,
Yeah.
and I would urge you to get it to members earlier than that, if you could, please.
yeah,
Would we
let-
look forward to this
that's what I was wondering. That sort of,
irrespective?
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
So let's look into it. We're and we'll come back to you. But I would suggest a meeting would be better than just a circulation.
Well,
Sorry, one is informal cabinet.
10th of May.
Okay, thank you.
potentially in the gap between the 10th and 24th.
Absolutely.
Obviously, the audit committee may well change its membership at that on the 24th. So we'd be essentially wrapping things up with
Yeah,
this current
absolutely.
iteration committee for those of us that remain beyond 5th of May. Okay.
You've made that point, Chairman. One of the things that has always taxed us in the past has been the high turnover of members of the audit committee. Now, okay, we've got elections between now and the next formal meeting of the audit committee on the 28th of June. I've just checked. However, if the elections are kind to members of the audit committee, could I make a plea that current members do state their place for a place on the audit committee, so that there is, I know it's so exciting, I know that, so that we do get that continuity, and I think it is very important.
I take your point, Councillor Tilsley. I would say that the 4 members in this room have been on this committee now. So there has been a consistency in some elements of that, and I think that there may have been a time when the membership of the audit committee chopped and changed quite a lot. But since we moved perhaps to the 4 years election cycle, there's been an ability to build consistency. But yes, I will note your point and encourage those that have any influence over their groups implement members on this committee to take consideration of that point. Should that be in place? Thank you, colleagues, and thank you. So I think we've got a bit of a plan there that we will look to. An extraordinary meeting of the committee to review that value for money from the external auditors. Thank you, colleagues. Okay, so then that came out of almost a matters of arising that I've allowed there within the item 4. But otherwise, do I get an agreement on those minutes? Colleagues, can I get the minutes agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you, colleagues. Item number 5 then, risk management update. Report of the Assistant Director Audit and Risk Management, that's Sarah, to give her report on the risk management work the council's doing.
Thank you. Well, I last presented this in January. Since then, I've had updates of all the risks from the risk owners. As part of that risk update, they were all asked to consider whether the situation in Ukraine had impacted on their risk levels. I haven't had any come back with an increase in the existing risk, and there have been some really good conversations, particularly on council management, its financial resilience and supply chain. I've had new risks proposed around the ability to address air pollution and reduce nitrogen dioxide levels across the city. That was formerly subsumed within the climate change risk. There's two schools of thought about whether we split the risk or whether we retire the climate change one. The two schools of thought really being that climate change is a big strategic issue and should be on there. Second is one, it's kind of like world peace. What can we do to affect climate change? How do strategic objectives? So that one at the moment is in a kind of a work in progress phase, and we'll come back through CLT back to this committee in July. The second proposal is to retire the health and wellbeing risk. There's been a lot of work done on this risk. It's been very well maintained. It's had some good actions in it. So achieving the Thrive at Work at foundation level, restructuring so that occupational health and safety, lots of resources made available for staff during the pandemic, the training of mental health first aiders. It's now felt to be in more of a business as usual type of place. So CLT did agree that that one could be deleted. So subject to what happens with climate change, we are putting one on and taking one off, or putting two on and take, sorry. Yeah, we're back to 21 again. The risk heat map shows the positioning proposed for the new risk, which is also in the same significant medium position as the health and wellbeing one that's coming off.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for that report. Colleagues, any questions from colleagues? Okay, no questions. Then I've got some questions. So firstly, I've spoken before in this meeting around corporate communications as a risk. I wondered if that had been raised with CLT and whether they considered it to be a risk that should be somewhere, or at least be able to give me an indication as to where it is on this map, because I still feel that corporate communications is one of those overarching themes about how we communicate with our residents, how we tell them what's happening, and then how, when, you know, from my view is that comms doesn't solve your problem, but it gives you time to solve your problem. It compounds upon us. So I wondered if there had been that, we'd managed to get that raised, and if not, whether we could. Then I had another question. I've been kind of going through with my advisor a little bit about trying to understand some of these action statuses, and in the amber column, where we've got high numbers of action statuses within the risk still still the amber area. So, for example, or amber risks in 7.2 rising pressures of demand, there are 8 amber risk actions. I wondered if there was a possibility of explaining why those numbers are getting quite high. Why is there a kind of entrenched issue? Are they always going to be amber? And there's just a bit of maybe explanation about what those numbers, how we're thinking through the numbers. So I think we've done very well in understanding the overall map. I think these have been really helpful tools, but perhaps it's about getting to the next level now so that the committee can understand what's going on there. So there's 2 questions, Sarah, if you don't mind.
I raised the communications issue with the director, who said he was going to speak to you, so I should have done that around the City Council. On the amber ones, I'm just having a look in real life. So one of the ones on 7.1 is to roll out the 3 conversations model and the progress. That is an action that is the intervention model, big piece of work, prediction analytics work. You can carry on and do more and more and more of that. So they are.
So they're very much ongoing things that I keep going. So should we perhaps be more concerned then with those actions that are in the where there's a number against the red? Gotcha. Okay. So, for example, equality representation strategic risk 3.3. There's a 1. Is that?
It's around the restructure.
Okay.
And was still being populated out. It was well underway. It had got badly delayed during the pandemic. Now we had kind of an introduction event to the new team. Actually, it's no longer that actually. But that had originally got a target set some time ago.
So I wonder if it's worth for future risk registers, because I really like this document. It's just maybe where we've got those numbers, anything in the red column, having a list of them, perhaps a understanding of the process, what goes from in red, because it's the teams behind it are working hard to get that into an amber and then into a green, and those ones that are just stuck in a red position and potentially, red as a tool, again, tool this committee, so particularly with regard to our assurance work we do.
There's one complication that I ask people to leave greens on for one time only, and it should be reflected in the risk register, either as a new source of assurance or a new control. So it will usually look like that, or should look like there's quite a low number of greens.
But yeah, you've got 6 greens and so on, because they haven't been removed. I mean, I guess this committee is going to be concerned most about that list of reds and understanding that, and then maybe as part of our learning when we engage with the cabinet member and heads of service in the format that we use, we will be able to that intelligence will be in our minds when those issues come in front of us again. So I think that would be a helpful thing to move forward with. I think, Sarah, but I don't point.
To reflect that in the pack.
So that would be great. Councillor Tilson.
On the red issue, if I may ask, SR5(1), inadequate property portfolio.
And health and safety.
And health and safety could you take us through? Because as far as I was aware, we were terribly short of properties in Birmingham. Is it the adequacy of the health and safety?
There are some of those surveys. Resurveying, those are both red. Lack of assigned responsible persons. And some related compliance data.
So that is all administrative work then, effectively.
But until we've got an absolutely up-to-date condition survey of every building in Birmingham, that's going to be either lead or amber.
Okay. Would it be unreasonable to set a date of the end of June, next official meeting of the audit committee, for that to be completed and moved into amber?
I'd have to find out how big that list is and who's working through it, but I'll get you an update.
Put your size 10s on, Sarah.
I think that would be helpful, actually, Councillor Tilsley. I think that's a good, some kind of timeline of where these reds and when we expect these reds to disappear, so that the committee can see where deadlines are being missed. I mean, there's always going to be a deadline missed and occasionally happening. That's the nature of the work we do. The question is when that deadline is missed and then not recovered within a reasonable time. And I think the committee would be interested in seeing that. Okay, colleagues, thank you. Any more further questions for Sarah? In which case, can I get that the audit committee has noted the progress in implementing the risk management framework and the assurance and oversight provided by the council leadership, and review the strategic risks and assess whether further explanation information is required from risk owners in order to satisfy itself that the risk management framework has been consistently applied. Those challenges and even in this meeting looked for improvement. Can I agree? Thank you. This then moves us to item 6, Birmingham City Council procurement governance arrangement. That's the report of the Assistant Director of Procurement. That's Steve Sandicott. Thank you for joining us. So you're going to give us a bit of a presentation on this item.
It's just a bit of an update, Chair, around the activities that have been the last, or one of the last October 2021 Audit Committee. There was a request to present for the Audit Committee to have findings around the root and branch review of procurements and commissioning and assurances to be provided on that. And this is what this report looks out to, or sets out to do. It provides members with an update of the activities that have been carried out from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and also then the recommendations that have been agreed, and those recommendations are set out in Appendix 1 to the report. I'm happy to go through that appendix at any point into it once we go through that. But since October 2021, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee has had a task and finish group was established to look at the council's procurement arrangements, which is basically our constitutional arrangements in terms of how we apply third-party spend and how we manage our third-party spend. The review had some standard terms and terms of reference that were set up, and the task and finish group was a cross-party group working through a range of activities. Those activities included a survey of suppliers, so seeking feedback from our suppliers as to how effective our procurement arrangement, a survey of officers as well, and internal staff who are involved in administering, if you like, from an officer level, the procurement governance arrangements. Benchmarking and comparisons with core cities and also with West Midlands partners around their rules and governance arrangements as well. And then part of the work then was then a review of the consultation of the government's new planned procurement regulations, which are due to be moving through the House of Commons. By a survey were information, they wanted information and how tenders were proportional around the use of small SMEs and locals. They wanted improved awareness, for example, around a procurement pipeline to be published going forward. So what that means and what tenders opportunities are coming forward there. Clarity around how social value is applied within the respective tenders, streamlining documents and things like that. A lot of those conversation also came forward from the officer perspective as well. So improved proportionality aligned to governance such as the scheme of delegation, reviewing where we can be proportional as to and around balancing the risk of compliance and balancing those risks as well. Improved training and improved documentation both on the intranet and internet as well. So all of those that information was then fed back through to the task from the task and finish group to the committee, and then there was a range of recommendations that were put forward, and those included including a make or buy decision as a pre-procurement stage. So determining whether or not a procurement was actually necessary, or whether we've got ability within our own existing council, say group of companies, for example, to deliver the requirements as opposed to going through a procurement. Introducing a new purchasing proceed to purchase threshold for under £5,000 worth of spend to make the arrangements more proportional. And then similarly, then raising the existing 10,000 level up to 25,000. So you've then got a new level from 5,000 to 25,000. And then introducing a works threshold from 25,000 to 250,000. Clearer lists of arrangements that are out of scope from the procurement rules was a key part of that. So being very clear and transparent in our procurement rules, which will be redrafted. And then clear lists around where there's grounds to step outside of applying the rules as they are set out. So there would be a clear waiver process that would need to be done and signed off in advance of actually proceeding along that route as well. And then where a breach occurs, so where the rules have not been applied and carried out, then a clarity that there is a breach procedure put in place going forward as well. Clarity around what would constitute an emergency, around emergency spend, and aligned with feedback from the supply market as well, then making sure that we're putting forward a pipeline of activity on our internet going forward as well. So those were many of the recommendations that came forward, which are now being worked up, Chair, into the revised draft of the procurement governance arrangements and procurement rules. And the aim is for those to be formally taken forward and formally considered as part of Cabinet from June or in June 2022. So I'll pause at that point, Chair, and I'm happy to take questions from the floor.
Councillor Tilsley.
Thank you. As you say, a all-party working group, an exciting way to spend 6 months. I've made the point before, and I think I've made it here, that there is potential impact on internal audit and Sarah's organisation, because as we are releasing some of the strictures at the lower level to ensure that there is financial probity, I think that internal audit have got a job of doing a number of spot checks to make sure that we following the principle. So, we've got to be realistic that we have shrunk the organisation, but we are still purchasing enormous volumes, and therefore it made sense to cut down on some of the administrative tasks that we're imposing on officers. But I think from a practical point of view, because we've caught enough people at the high level in the past, but at the lower level it is a temptation. And therefore, I know that I mentioned it to Sarah before, and she was building in some additional days to undertake that work. So it's that assurance that I think the committee needs.
I mean, just before Sarah comes in on that one, Councillor, what I would say is that as part of the work that we're now doing to actually redraft the actual rules themselves, Sarah's part of that conversation. Sarah will be making sure from an audit perspective that making sure that the actual new procurement governance rules are fit for purpose, including with colleagues from legal as well. And then going forward, I'm sure Sarah will start to build in some checks and balances and due probity in regards to how those are managed. But I'll hand over to Sarah at that point.
So we've started looking at this from what SAP would tell us. We've got a new opportunity now with a fresh start with Oracle, which came on this week. I'm trying to look at Oracle controls, and before I can do anything, I have to supply procurement with a copy of the business case to allow me to spend control process, a copy of the contract, copy of the direct award report, and all of that to be on the system so that I can set up a purchase order that then can be linked to the contract. We can then report on spend that isn't linked to contracts, and that's where we'll find our samples.
So that's just normal spend controls is what Sarah's.
They're quite heightened at the moment. The spend controls are.
Yeah, because we're trying to balance the year end.
Yeah.
But the short answer is yes, isn't it? Yeah.
But I thought asking the questions for the record,
Yeah,
from
absolutely.
an audit point of view, it's okay, it's belt and braces. We are in the belt and braces business.
Yes, we are.
Indeed.
On the audit side.
Thank you, Councillor Tilsley. Thank you, Officer. Councillor Bryden.
You mentioned other local authorities. I'd just be interested to know what respects you felt that other local authorities might have been performing better than Birmingham. That's one question.
Okay. I mean, the work that we did with the other local authorities was very much looking at procurement governance rules. I mean, the shortfalls, say, would be where quality, shall we say, is how we had existing procurement rules. So, rules require any below 10,000 to receive 3 quotations, and applying that rigor for all spend from 0 up to 10,000, irrespective. That was what the rules were saying in effect. So that was an area of opportunity for us to just try and create a little bit of proportionality at that lower level, and that certainly existed across the benchmark work that we did with the other core cities. In particular, they had, if you like, opportunity to. The rules were not applied rigorously below a certain level, or the rules were, if you like, just had proceed to purchase opportunities and things like that. So I think that those were some of the areas. The structure of the rules, I think, is a key part as to what we're taking forward, going in terms of how we're now redrafting rules to make them clearer, to make them more straightforward and more applicable to be applied. So there's quite a piece of work that we're doing to actually make them more accessible, more readable, and with them being clearer in how they're presented. Then we're hopeful that will also then aid the compliance aspects of that as well. So I think that those are a couple of points and observations that I would say from my perspective from that work.
Thank you, Councillor Morrell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I don't sit on this ONS committee, so I've unfortunately not been involved in this work. Would have very much liked to, because procurement is something I'm always talking about. We just did a report at City Council, last council, about the property portfolio, and a lot of this came about on the Economy and Skills Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the back of the Hollymore scandal, which was in my ward. We have Hollymore is an old mental hospital, could be a fantastic community asset. So I told the ladies who run it to go to the private sector and get 3 separate quotes, and they came back between £60,000 and £90,000. That was for a range of different bits of work. We had to wait for the internal procurement process of the City Council to come back, and they came back with £450,000, which is 7 times the cost. In fact, you could probably buy the building. In fact, the building was at risk of being sold by the council, and we had to fight tooth and nail to make sure they didn't. And so we ended up coming back to the Economy and Skills Over and Scrutiny Committee, and we discovered actually Hollymore wasn't isolated. So the chair at the time, Councillor Robson, did an inquiry. It was a cross-party piece of work, and we brought people, community groups from across the city in front of us for that inquiry, and every single one said they had the same problem when it came to procurement, that they have these buildings falling into disrepair. And as Councillor Tysley has just said, we have a large property portfolio, and there's so much of this stuff being put into disrepair because of the procurement, because they simply just can't get this stuff repaired. So a lot of work went into that report. It went to City Council. The thing that I was disappointed about the report in the end was that a lot of the procurement stuff was taken out of it, and they framed it a lot more around the social value aspects of property portfolios. So it's encouraging to see that on the resources over in Scrutiny Committee that you are actually now focusing on procurement, and that's why I said at the start I would have really loved to have been involved in this. So I just wanted to frame what I'm about to say around that, because you mentioned the legislation going through government as well. I'm also aware of that. In fact, I was name dropped in the Queen's speech and the Hollymore scandal when that was going through. And I want to understand really as a councillor, because it's not just Birmingham City Council, it's government, it's every local authority in the public sector. And I know when I worked in media and marketing, every company I've worked for, they have their own sales representative who deals with public sector contracts. And the reason is because they're always incredibly lucrative. It's almost like you just walk in there and you can just name a price and they walk out with it. And I just want to understand, why is that? And what processes do we have to ensure that people in Birmingham are getting value for money? Because politically, and this is not going to break Purda, because it is true, on the left and the right, we have this consistent ping pong between, is it because of austerity or is it because of procurement? And if we just sorted out our procurement, we could create much more value for our citizens, and we could do so much more with, for example, the property portfolio that we've got in the city. But unfortunately, it always comes back to procurement. It seems to prevent us. And then all that happens is us politicians just keep throwing mud at each other, but who's responsible for it? Can we just sort the procurement out and make sure that people are getting good value and move from there? Thank you.
For being an enabling service that enables opportunities and outcomes. The value for money question, and the question that I think that we need to do more on, and local authority needs to do so, is the grand we is probably more around contract management as well. That's a key part of that whole cycle, from the commissioning through to the actual delivery of that. So contract management is a key part, and we, as part of the within my service area, where we're now looking at a contract management that will then give, again, more structure, but proportional structure to the risks around the contracts that we've got in place. And equally, we've now got, through our commissioning areas, we've now got a commissioning gateway within our adult service area. So that, again, that's giving more focus and more rigour as to the early business case considerations before we go to tendering as well. So I think it's joining up those 3 component pieces is a key part of that. If you get your contract management correct, then you would be doing benchmarking. So those big shock surprises around, well, actually, 60,000 to 400,000 scenarios would not exist, because you'd be managing the supply chain more effectively as well. So I think it's big interconnected piece, but public sector traditionally has not been particularly great around contract management end to end in the right proportional way, and I think that's a big part of it as well.
That's Morale.
Just one final point on that. Civico is one of the contractors that does a lot of the work, and it's 100% owned by Birmingham City Council. Now, people have different opinions on this. Myself and Councillor Jenkins were very uneasy with city councils or any public body owning private companies, just because of the moral hazard, as they say in economics, the fact that if you're a private business, you can just go to the state, it's a taxpayer effectively that's giving you the money, you can subsidise a failing business. And I do kind of find it extraordinary that we have a company, a contractor, that's 100% owned by Birmingham City Council, that's charging these extortionate rates to their own assets. So it's kind of like, you know, I have to be very careful because, again, depending on who you speak to, and this is from all political parties, some people support that, some people don't. So I understand it's a polarising issue. In fact, there's some councillors who are non-executive on the board, which is, you know, that's fine. But it's just, it just feels like that is, you know, how many other businesses out there in Birmingham who are struggling, especially during pandemic, would love those.
Very careful. I think we need to be careful that what our opinions are in general and what is legitimate is what we've got at this committee is focused. And I think that we've had answers on the Civico thing before, and I do feel that unless you've got a specific question around a Civico and procurement, very specific and tightly specific and evident, I think we can talk a lot about our views about a Civico, but maybe now is not the meeting to do it.
The specific question is, in terms of what we're doing moving forward, let's say, you know, a similar situation like Hollymoor comes up and we could get the repairs done. Let's say, because I don't think it was actually a Civico that were doing the 450 plus, but let's say it was.
But let's not say
no, because it's an important, no, it's an important question.
We are really dealing with
it's a very
technical and specific. We say what is that we know is fact.
So the question is, what procedures or how would it for the council to say, right, we're not going with an internal contract, or we're going to go with these because we can get a better market rate? And if not, what is it that is preventing us from doing that?
Sure. Okay. Just two points. I'll try to keep brief on that. The new rules are setting out that make or buy decision, so that will then be a value for money make or buy decision. And then the second part, in terms of companies, we're looking to treat group companies no different from external suppliers in terms of contract management. Use a Civico as an example, then what we're looking to ensure there is that we've got the appropriate client relationship management, so the intelligent client within the council, to make sure that we're managing companies effectively as well. So I would.
Chairman, whether I can be helpful to Councillor, 5 years ago, I think it's 5 years ago, we did have a task and finish scrutiny, specifically on Civico, and looked at the whole of the management structure. And I'm sure that officers can make the report available to you if they haven't. But as a rule of thumb, their management charge was around about 20%, when the rest of the utility business was around completely distorted the end price that you were getting. But I'm sure if you ask around, officers can make that available to you.
I'm sure we can look to identify that report.
That was another exciting 6 months of my life.
Thank you, Councillor Tilsley. I'm reminded that the Group Companies Governance Committee does exist to hold organisations like a Civico to account, and this committee does engage with that Group Companies Governance we did at the last meeting, and I'd be very happy if you wished to raise that issue again through the process, Councillor Morell, for that to be looked into as part of our discussion with Group Companies Governance. I think, thank you, Steve, for your question. My final question, I think, unless anybody else has another question they wish to raise. Firstly, I am sad that my kind of competitive colleague, Councillor Marion Jenkins, is not here, because I see his name loom large in this paperwork. It would be interesting to hear his take on these things, but sadly we cannot do that today. I think the question I'm kind of interested in is, where does the audit committee, do you see the audit committee fitting in and engaging with this work going forward? We have this kind of almost a slight tension between us and the Finance and Resources Overview and Scrutiny Committee. What's your thought of what can come to us on a relatively regular basis for us to help to ensure that the questions that Councillor Morell is asking are regularly asked and good answers are given to them?
Sure. I suppose possibly one of the areas could be around any, any areas of breaches, perhaps of procedures, and that's going to be a key part of what we're looking to do now. Building that transparency across the piece, because and lists of waivers as well. So where there's been a request and a signed off request to set the rules aside and do something slightly different. So use social value as the next. The social value policy says that social value should form 20% of weighting of any procurement. Let's say there's case that social value wouldn't apply because it's safe just for software. The social value benefit is diminished. That could possibly be an example for a waiver, but we could certainly be, we'll be reporting on waivers, recording and reporting on breaches, and I think that would be a good area of discussion at Audit Committee. Personally.
Thanks, Steve. So how often do you
quarterly? We're looking to do quarterly updates. So I mean, Audit Committee might want to do a 6 monthly.
Yeah, so quarterly gives us a list of those breaches and waivers, so that we can see what happened.
That we can see the trajectory as to hopefully breaches coming down and waivers being appropriate to to the circumstances and things like that. That'd be.
That would agree. Then I'm proposed to that being noted. Okay, thank you very much for that presentation and answering those questions. So therefore, then I can ask that the audit note the review and scrutiny committee and the recommendations as have been set out in appendix. Agreed? Agreed. Thank you, colleagues. Item 7, schedule of outstanding minutes, and I'm aware that we had an additional item that wasn't listed on the minutes, but was requested, which was a briefing note that was circulated to the committee on Monday, the 25th of April, yesterday, which addressed the member question raised in the private session of the meeting related to global and it includes additional comments from finance around the wider resilience aspect. So the members should have that briefing note, and thank you to Stephen for preparing that. So if I bring up our list of actions, bear with me a second, comments. Going through these, so we did quite a bit of kind of checking through those. So we still have reds. Do we? Actually, we've got lots of reds, haven't we? And do we have any news on any of these? I think I have written the letter to the chief exec, but we haven't had a response. That's item 413.
In respect of 413, Chair, when the agenda was published, there wasn't an update that could be included within the documentation because it had gone, but I can confirm that the Chief Executive's office has responded to indicate that the Chief Executive would be willing to attend a future meeting of the Audit Committee to address the issues that are raised. So that's the committee's choice. That can either stay on as a red until it's complete or take away as an action to ensure that happens.
I think we'll keep it on there until it's completed, but we'll know that action is occurring on it. So that was me jumping to my responsibility. So first, to item 377, was the briefing, Council Cybersecurity, GDPR, and roles related to data processing, and we've had the briefing note on the complaints, the learnings from the complaints colleagues, have we? Or am I getting that confused with a bit of an update we've had elsewhere? Can we chase up on both those items? And I think that the briefing should be for the new committee.
I think Peter Bishop has given a briefing to groups.
Right, yeah.
But I don't think that he's given one to the audit committee.
Where I've got that wrong. So we will need the briefing to happen for new members of the incoming committee post the AGM. Then we have Managing Director Housing reporting on the valuation of tower blocks in city housing stock. I haven't seen anything on that, so if we can just again to fall through with item 414. We were going to raise this. The reason why 414 is delayed is that the cabinet member was due to attend the last meeting of the committee, but we deemed that because of PERDA, we deemed that would not sit well. So that will be answered in the June meeting of the new committee, should the new committee wish to continue the ways that we currently have of working. Resolved, item 433. procurement risk, a report on procurement risk factors to be provided. So we can, then the greys can be removed. And then we've got this issue of valuation process associated with the council's plant and property. Again, another brief session that should be organised for members of the new committee. So the 2 greys can be removed. I think that's okay, colleagues. And colleagues on that. Thank you, colleagues. And then on to the date, the next meeting, which is Tuesday, the 28th of June, and that will be of the new committee. We may well have a meeting before that. That will be with the new committee. Any other urgent business from?
Well, just to say thank you, Fred, for chairing audit committee all this time. No problem.
Thank you.
Are you coming? Are you going to be coming back? Are you? If you
depends whether you're, depends whether again, and there's been challenges around my role that I need to reflect on.
Fair enough. Okay.
Depends on the vagaries of the document.
We will see.
I am merely preparing to get through May the 5th and May the 6th, and then I will reconsider what forms I fill in should I return on May the 5th. And that, all kinds of different forms depending on that result. Okay, so in which case, so this potentially is a challenging one. Actually, I said 10, and maybe the city solicitor's advice might be useful on this, is that obviously authority to chair and officers, the chairman to move in an urgent situation between meetings, the chair jointly with the relevant chief officer has authority to act on behalf of the committee. But essentially, May the 5th could disrupt them. I don't know what the best thing is to request that be passed. I don't know. In one of those things where an end of term occurs and a new term begins.
We are, and I don't have an immediate answer for that, I'm afraid, Chair, so we're really transparent with the relation to that. I will think about that and provide an answer and circulate that.
Because I think one of the challenges is obviously when we roll up. I mean, in the previous occurrence, you could have a consistency of membership, but now we may well be. Who knows what the people of Birmingham may decide on? And I'm not going to use this position to say anything other than that. But it would be. I don't feel comfortable passing that because potentially there is a level of peril with my position that means that I would not be on that. Can we agree not to move?
I think there could be a situation where some executive decisions might have to be taken. And you therefore move it and have an appropriate member.
Who's the deputy chairman?
So if you're saying that we have
which we would do. So essentially, if I should, I'm really deputy is myself and Councillor Tilsley, no longer return post May 5th. But I guess we could presumably take that risk. So the idea would be that should I not return, then the deputy chair will be in place.
Yeah. Yes.
In which case, in an urgent situation between meetings, the chairman jointly with the relevant chief officer has authority to act on behalf of the committee. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. I don't think we have anything to go for private, do we?
There's one item in the private papers, Chair, which it's a one-page summary of the private minutes taken at the February meeting.
And ask to move into private session. Thank you, colleagues. In which case, can we stop the recording of the